The business community and consumers are two quite different parts of the Australian economy. So just how much do they agree about a future Australia? Today, Future Focus, a joint report released by Ipsos and KPMG, analyses interviews with CEOs of top Australian companies and Australian subsidiaries of multinationals, as well as surveys of consumer groups, using two scenarios for the nation in 2020. One scenario is confident in engaging global Australia, and another a much more conservative or measured Australia. Now, Rebecca Huntley is director of Ipsos and one of the co-authors of the report, and she joins me now. Rebecca Huntley, welcome to the programme.
Thanks for having me.
Now, why did you decide to look at consumers on the one hand and business on the other? Was it issues like mining tax and carbon tax?
Oh, well, there were certainly some of the issues that came up in the discussions of both the consumers and the business leaders that we talked to. But we're really interested to see whether there are any points of agreement between those two very divergent groups, and also where there were some key, blank spots, really, what consumers were focusing on and, let's say, what the business community was focusing on.
Well, on the agreement side, I gather that neither thought that there would be a drop in house prices anytime soon.
No, there's this kind of belief that Australian houses either flatten or get more and more expensive as time goes on, that something really radical has to happen to the way we plan our cities or the way that we plan our lifestyles, that kind of goal to have your own home still being so central to people. So housing prices are all very confident, both sides of the equation in housing prices.
Areas of difference, a big area was really around population and growth, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It was very clear that consumers did not like the idea of Big Australia. They didn't necessarily like the idea of a closed, old-style 1950s-style Australia. They wanted something different. They wanted a sense of a vibrant community that wasn't too big, and they found it hard to articulate that. Obviously, the business community wanted a Big Australia. They were very concerned about the retreat from Big Australia that we've seen recently in political debate. And so on those two questions, there was not a lot of connection. And also what it was not clear is, to me, talking to the business leaders that we talked to, how they were going to bridge that gap.
You talked to them on the basis of anonymity.
Exactly.
How important was that, and what sort of feeling did you get about their concerns?
Well, I think what we got with anonymity was real frankness about the lack of vision from government. A lot of business leaders were scathing, particularly about leadership at state government level, but also to an extent leadership at the federal level as well. There was a sense amongst some business leaders that we had lost a real opportunity with the global financial crisis to really look at the Australian economy and how we could make sure that it's prosperous, not just in the next 30 or 40 years, but beyond that. So they were absolutely frank about our political masters, but they were also interestingly frank about their colleagues, and said that the business community in Australia is often quite reactive and passive when it comes to big questions that face our country, and just perhaps only really are prepared to step out of the business circles that they're in to talk about issues that might directly affect their industry. So they're both critical of political leadership, but also to an extent of business leaders as well.
I guess this survey also happened in May-June, at a time when the whole Rudd-Gillard conundrum was playing out.
Well, that's exactly right. So in one of the scenarios, we have a female Prime Minister, which everybody said is bound to happen. Perhaps everybody's a bit shocked it happened as quickly as it did. But yes, that was. But all of the issues that kind of came up in the federal election there were storm clouds on the horizon at the time that we did these interviews. So issues around, for example, population, immigration, the mining tax, they were all front and centre at that time.
Was there anything that you learned which actually could be helpful for business?
Well, I think one of the things that fascinated me coming out of the report was the issue of nuclear power. I thought this was off the consumer agenda, but it was very clear that in our groups people said, well, perhaps this is an option. Perhaps climate change is a real game changer in terms of whether we need to consider the nuclear option. Now, all of the business leaders said that they thought nuclear should be part or could be part of our future energy needs, but all of them obviously were quite nervous about raising that officially on the public agenda, whereas actually you've got more a willingness amongst consumers to have that discussion. So you've got a slightly tentative, passive business community about a big issue like this, and you've got a willing, perhaps let's have the discussion, we might might be prepared to be convinced
Well,
consumer-based.
that'll appeal to the Ziggy Sakwaskis of this world, won't it? Now, shifts in social media.
Yes.
It's obviously very big on the consumer side.
Yeah.
Do you think it's appreciated to the same degree by big business?
I think it really varies depending on the business leader, how they understand the medium, and also what kind of industry they're in. They're always kind of waiting to see, you know, is this a flash in the pan? Is this something that's going to change? Do I need to really change the way my business operates to adopt this? And then once I do that, it'll all be gone. But, I mean, social media, interestingly, was not something that... The whole issue of technology and the need to have a really effective broadband was something that was talked about in consumer groups and in business groups. But the research that we do shows that social media is huge with consumers, and they're moving faster than the business community in many ways in terms of how they're using it.
Briefly, I know one leader said that a likely scenario was a bad mix of global Australia and measured Australia.
Exactly.
We're going to get a bigger population, but we're going to be over-governed. It won't be this global Australia. It will be 25 million with racial tension, disharmony and dysfunction. Do you agree?
Yeah. I think without proper political leadership to create a context for business leaders being a little bit more, being more proactive, being part of the conversation a bit more, but particularly political leadership and that massive investment in infrastructure that we require, then that's a real possibility, yes.
Well, with this hung parliament, we'll see how they go.
Yes.
Rebecca Huntley, thank you very much for joining Lateland Business.
Thank you.